Now that we've had OP13 for a couple weeks, and alongside a couple treasure cups, both online and some store events in your local area, you may either be tired of playing either Emu, Ace, Zoro, or maybe you're a little frustrated that maybe your off-meta decks aren't working out too well. Do not fret, dear player. I'm going to show you a ton of different deck lists, both ones that I've created and what top players have talked about. And before we get going, apologize for the mess back here. This is a ongoing project in here. I just needed to record in here for this video. And before we do anything else, because I got to pay rent this month, let's hear from more from our sponsor. Listen, if you've seen my videos or you've maybe seen me at an event, I love Garden playmats. And especially with Black Friday, now is an insane time to get your very own playmat, or maybe a gift for somebody else. All of the standard playmats are going to be cut at a discount. And not only that, you've got stickers, pins, apparel, that's also going to be discounted on the website. And these discounts are already so good, and you know I've got a code there for a discount of your own, but it's actually been bumped up to 10% to help you save even more on this Black Friday. Make sure to stack up the savings and get a great gift for either yourself or somebody else this holiday season. The link to Garden's website where you can get your next favorite TCG product is in the description below. Thank you so much to Garden for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to that video. Okay, so the first deck I'm going to talk about is Red Black Sabo. This is the deck that I'm personally playing within this format. It's my favorite one. If you have 4 or more life cards, you give the leader minus 1,000 power. That's an ongoing effect that happens on your opponent's turn and your turn. But when you have a Dawn on your leader and you have an 8 cost or more on the field, your leader and all your characters gain 1,000 power. So eventually, even though you start out as a 4K leader, you eventually become a 6K leader for the entire game, right? So long as you have that 8 cost on field. And that power buff is super helpful in a lot of situations to be able to make Hack, right? A very good blocker that helps get your leader effect off, a 6,000 power blocker. Sabo, debatably, this secret rare is the most important card in your deck. You get this blocker on the field and then utilize the activate main on this card. Not only can he become an 8 cost, right? Giving himself +2 cost, but on top of that, give a Rested Dawn to your leader to be able to activate your leader effect to +1,000 power the board, and he becomes an 8,000 power blocker. This card is so nice to be able to block against a lot of 7K swings, right? Especially with Ace, and even its 8K swings, right? After it plays the 10 drop Whitebeard. It's just a simple block 1K out of the swing. I have personally moved down my dragon count to 3 instead of 4, as I've talked about in previous videos. Dragon is a good card, don't get me wrong, but especially in my testing, I really only played 1 dragon, maybe 2 at most. And with the heavy search counts that we have in this deck, with Bello Betty being a full 4 copies, right? Looking at that top 5. Koala looking at the top 3, finding a Rev Army card. And Monkey D. Garp being a full playset. Because our leader is Sabo, we can utilize this searcher and grab anything with a cost of 3 or more, which is literally any character that's not a searcher within this deck, especially also with the Revolutionary Army HQ to help filter our deck and filter our hand. There are 16 search cards within this deck, making it, in my opinion, the most consistent deck in this format. You will probably not miss Dragon 99% of the time. I've also got 3 copies of Monkey D. Dragon. This one I could be convinced of putting down to 2, but this is a really good play as well, right? Being able to be an 8 cost on the field and give 2 Rested Dawn somewhere fits perfectly for your leader effect, and then he becomes a 10,000 power rush character. Synergizes super well with the deck, and because we play something like Garp, we can also find an incredibly important card in Stussy. Now, this is the reason why I feel like Sabo has a very good matchup into Ace. It's not like 100-0, but I think you have a pretty good shot so long as you know what you're doing, right? Stussy being able to KO any character on the field, whether it's active or rested, is such a good card because even though you have to trash one of your characters, you play 12 one-drop searchers. Like, you are going to have characters on the the field to trash, so long as you did a little bit of searching within this deck. And a lot of times as well, right, even though the only search that you can find this card is GARP, because you're so aggressive on the searches with your different searchers or your Revolution Army HQ stage, if you go ahead and bottom deck a Stussy, you're going to be able to loop your deck more than likely in the game, so you can figure out through your counts on where that Stussy is. I have personally played games against Ace where I've bottom decked Stussy on the first Bello Betty search, but because I knew exactly where it was in my deck, because I continued searching, I was able to GARP exactly for that Stussy that I bottom decked earlier to win the game, remove a 10 cost Whitebeard, and completely nullify my opponent's side of the field. You also now have a searchable way for Goldie Roger. Now, this one I only have at one copy because I feel like you don't actually need Goldie Roger a lot of times. I think he's just a tech card and he's just a way to push through as a 14,000 power swing, right, if you can get a Dawn on your leader. He's definitely great, do not get me wrong. He's not as important as something like Stussy in my opinion, especially because he can't give that Dawn. I've also got 2 copies of Black Vortex. I just think this card is really, really good, even though in my opinion, it's the hardest card to find because you can't grab it off GARP or any of your other searches. But especially in the green Zoro matchup, which is pretty tough, don't get me wrong, this is a great card for that, and also in the Emu matchup, which also, again, is a really tough matchup, but you can nullify Jupiter to knock all of your opponent's Celestial Dragon characters to 5,000 base power for the rest of the turn. It makes it so nice, especially when they swing 8 with one of their characters. You Black Vortex their Jupiter to put it down to a 6,000 power swing, and all you got to do is just block with Sabo, right? Because if you have Sabo on the field, he's an 8,000 power blocker. And even if they Nuzjuro this down to 6, it is still a block 1k counter. This deck is a lot of fun in my opinion. Now, next I've got a Bonnie list here, and I can't take credit for this list. This was posted by Luigi Amano over on his Twitter. I believe this one of the very first locals that he had in his area, and I saw him post this list, and I thought this was a really cool way to play this deck. For him and anybody else that I snagged lists from to show you guys, I will have them in the pinned comment down below. Links to be able to get them. And if you're part of the notification squad and you came literally seconds after this video was released, it might be a second or two before I get the comment in because I can't put the comment until the video is released. Anyways, Jewelry Bonnie, if you do not know, a 5-life OP13 mono yellow leader. It's Egghead and Bonnie Pirates. Your turn once per turn. When you play a character with a trigger on your turn, you give 2 Rested Dawn cards to one of your leaders or one of your characters. We've seen this deck in the Japan Championships. It is definitely an aggressive style deck, right? Playing down the character, reutilizing Dawn, having several burn effects as well, right? You see Basil Hawkins in this list with that on KO effect of trashing one of your opponent's life cards. You've got Nico Robin, right? Maybe if they guard a little bit more in the early stages of the game, that on play effect gonna be able to trash one of their life cards. But then on top of that, because your leader effect, you're gonna be able to attach 2 Dawn somewhere, maybe swing 7 with this Jewelry Bonnie if you're doing it on a 6 Dawn turn. Especially with the Lilith Searcher card in this deck, it's important to play so many triggers, right? Only 4 cards in this deck do not have a trigger, and it's this Stussy right here. I'll talk about that Stussy in a moment. So, and even though Lilith can't grab herself, you have 42 targets with a trigger in this deck. That is so many targets in my opinion. One of the cards that I've really liked as well is the 3-cost Jewelry Bonnie from OP08, right? With that Dawn ×1 of when a card is removed from your opponent's life cards, you can draw 2 and trash 1 from your hand. An excellent card to be able to have on the field to be able to play when either you use the Dawn and swing big on somebody, or potentially have one of these burn kind of life cards, or this one, the 9-cost Jewelry Bonnie, right? Really built to be a part of this deck. Because your leader's an Egghead type, you gain rush, a 10,000 power rush, and then your opponent adds the top of their life to their hand. That can allow you not only to draw 2, trash 1, right, to get a little bit of filtering, to get some draw potential, but on top of that, you get to reutilize 2 of those Dawn, which is so good in my opinion. Some of the other good tech cards that I've seen in here, I like the S-Snake, right, because you usually don't interact with your life cards in any way. Being able to flip up one of your life cards just to be able to minus 2,000 and battle the board a little bit can be so good, right, especially because this is an on-play and when attacking. Really allows you to maybe get this in multiple consecutive turns if you're taking at least 1 life card every single turn. The other S-Snake back from OP08, right, on that on play, up to one of your characters with the cost of 6 or less other than Luffy cannot attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. This, in my opinion, is such a good card into Ace, right, stunning the Yamatos, the Jozus, the Marcos, right, all of their potential swings that are not 9 or 10 cost Edward Newgate. This is also nice in the Emu matchup, right? Stunning all of those celestial dragons, especially Zoro, that does some good power minusing. And even in Zoro, right? This stuns Cavendish, this stuns Tashigi, this stuns Trafalgar Law. There are so many good targets that with this card. If you want to play this deck, I highly encourage that you play this card. And that's not the only stun that we have, right? Boa Hancock from PRBO2, if you got your playset with that on play, trashing a card with trigger from your hand, and your opponent's rested leader up to one of your opponent's characters other than Luffy cannot attack until the end of the opponent's next end phase. And this doesn't have a cost restriction at all, right? So you can even stun the 9 10-drop Newgates, the 9-drop Zoro that maybe the green Zoros have teched in. There's so many good options within this deck. I love this deck, especially even, you know, talking about Otama. Otama, if you're really trying to go in for a game, right, not only when you play this card on the field proactively, you get to reutilize the Dawn, making it basically a free character, but on that activate main, if you have 1 life left, you take that last life. That's a plus 3,000 to one of your leaders or characters. You basically going for a game got a plus 3,000 power card, which could make the difference. This deck is really cheeky. This deck is fun. And I think, especially in matchup knowledge, you're going to skill check a lot of your opponents when they don't know that this is coming. I would highly encourage trying this out, especially if you got the PRBO2 cards of Boa Hancock and Otama, which is probably the most barring part of the deck cost-wise. Now, if you've been watching the Chinos Cup in this OP13 format, you know that Lim has made a lot of noise, right? Lim on that activate main once per turn, resting 3 Dawn cards and playing a Odyssey type character of a cost of 5 or less on the field and then ramping 1 Dawn gives it this kind of aggressive move of cheating out these characters early, swarming the field, and also ramping to be able to get to 10 Dawn before your opponent. You may have even seen Lim excel in our OP13 case tournament not too long ago. I've got this list right here. This is Kaiba's list. My good friend Kaiba TCG on Twitter had been having a lot of success at locals with this Lim list, and I thought it was kind of cool, so I wanted to show it off. Your most important Odyssey characters start off with this Lim, right? Once per turn, if this character would be removed from the field by your opponent's effect, you can rest one of your Odyssey type characters instead, and then at the end of turn, you can restand an Odyssey type character as active. This is a huge part in the game plan of your deck. This little 1-drop having a protection on itself, but also being able to restand so many of these different characters, right? 3-drop Lim is a searcher, an important searcher, finding Odyssey type characters in your hand and potentially restanding as active at the end of turn. Doflamingo, right? A 5-cost 6k blocker that you can cheat out onto the field as early as turn 2 on your 3 Dawn turn. Also restands, so you could go ahead and swing aggressively with this blocker, and if you have 2 or more rested characters, you set it as active. Dracula Mihawk, another great Odyssey type character. If you've got those 2 or more rested characters, just restand a 5 or less as active, being able to potentially swing with it again or protect it on the field. Anel, another really important card, being able to draw 3, trash 2. Being an excellent filter and dig, drawing 3 and trashing 2 is one of the more aggressive counts of draw that we've seen in this game. And Sabo is the final 5-cost Odyssey character, right? When attacking once per turn, if you have 3 or more rested characters, just draw a card. It's a little bit harder to get off, right? Because you have to have 3 rested characters on that swing, which is the highest count out of any of them, but still a good one if you can get it. And then if you do not know what the synergies of Limb, right, with all the different restanding, right? We talked about this 3-cost Limb restanding. We talked about Doflamingo restanding. We talked about this Limb restanding a character. You get to choose the order exactly how you want it. So hypothetically, if your board is the 1-cost Limb, 3-cost Limb, and the 5-cost Doflamingo all rested, at the end of turn, you can restand all 3 of these characters, right? Because you have 3 rested characters on the field, you can restand this Limb as active. Now that you have only 2 rested characters left, you can now restand this Doflamingo, right? Because you have 2 or more rested characters. And then because your 1-cost Limb restands an Odyssey type character as active at the end of turn, you can restand itself. And then on top of that, there's another synergy within this deck of the rested characters themselves, right? Because Limb has to play characters as rested onto the field, no matter what character they are. If you have 2 or more rested characters, once again, you can restand a cost 5 or less as active. This Dracula Mihawk counts himself when you play it on the field, right? So you only need 1 other character as you're playing this Mihawk on the field to be able to restand. With Enel, you only need 1 other rested character to be able to get this draw effect off. Just makes the cheating so good within this deck. Some of the other cards that I have found interesting in this list, the first one we'll talk about is Shanks. Now, you may already know that Shanks is in this list, but especially if you do not know, Shanks, a 10-drop on play, set all of your Dawn cards as active. Then you cannot play cards from hand during this turn. In case you don't know the ruling, yes, you cannot restand the 10 Dawn and then go ahead and pay 5 to be able to play this Sabo on the field from your hand. That's not allowed with this interaction. But after you 10 cost and restand all of your Dawn, what makes this card so powerful is that Limb actually is allowed to play a character through her leader effect after playing the 10-drop Shanks. This is an official ruling. This is actually allowed. I know it's a little confusing, but essentially this 10-drop Shanks says you cannot play characters from your hand with that cost, basically. I know it doesn't say with the card's cost, but you cannot pay 5 to play that 5-drop Sabo. But because Limb is paying 3 Dawn with its leader effect to play a different card out of the field, it moves around this Shanks effect. I think it's such an interesting idea and a very, very good card. And I was also surprised to see 5-drop Sanji, right? Especially when you talk about this Sanji, it's not searchable, right, within the Odyssey archetype. But if you play this down on your 6th Dawn turn, you can go ahead on play, restand 2 Dawn cards as active. Now having 3 Dawn overall as active, you can use Limb's leader effect and play another one of these Odyssey characters down onto the field that you probably have in your hand, being able to ramp then to 7. It's honestly one of the only ways so early in the game to be able to double play characters out onto the field, and especially because he's a 7k, he is definitely a threat to attack. Even though you don't get this end of turn because your leader is not a film or straw hat crew kind of character, it's the basis of being able to play out 2, 6, 7,000 power bodies in a single turn that makes the play so strong in Limb, right? Another reason why 12,000 power character immediately into like a 6,000 power character is so good. Scratchman Apu's a really cool 2k in my opinion, right? Being able to rest 2 cost some Koshiro blockers. In the Emu matchup, you can rest Charlos. And even in the Ace matchup, if they're teching in something like the 1 cost Vista, you can rest that as well. And then the big body, especially if you're not facing against a removal deck that has something like Red Rock or maybe Stussy, Roronoa Zoro is a win card immediately. Even though he comes in as rested onto the field, if you can protect him and keep him alive, the 3 swings coming in are going to be deadly to your opponent, especially when you have options like Scratchman Apu to be able to rest little chum blockers. Some of the cards that I also like in here, Divine Departure, I thought was a really, really cool one of, right? Even though it is the typical 0 cost plus 3,000 event card, being able on that main for 6 Dawn to minus 8,000 power a character and then swing into it with whatever you want. There are so many good targets for this card to be able to battle the board, control your opponent's side of the field to not have anything out there. And especially on a 9-10 Dawn turn, you can still play a character out on the field because of your leader effect. You got Dead Man's Game, which is one of the best green cards out right now, especially in terms of events. Judgment of Hell, we've talked about this card a bit on the channel, especially in the Zoro matchup, right? This is a pretty good card, being able to minus 3,000 in a couple different spots. And Slow Beam Sword. I like this card a lot. I think this card is super cheeky. Being able to give your leader or a character plus 2,000 power in a battle, but then rest any of your opponent's characters. This card can stop a swing. This card can stop a blocker, right? Think about in a game setting where maybe you played a Zoro on the field and you're facing up against something like Ace. Ace goes ahead into their 10 Dawn turn. They go ahead and play the 10 drop Whitebeard, being able to draw 2, trash 1, and then give 2 Rested Dawn to a leader or character to then start swinging 8. You may not be using Slow Beam to be able to necessarily get out of their attacks if they're going at face at your leader, but because Ace typically has to proactively play a leader before they swing a lot of times, Slow Beam Sword nullifies that Newgate completely. And then it's off to the fences for this Zoro if they don't have any other blockers on field. Especially because Ace, if you do not know, only minuses 2,000 power for a battle. So Zoro, even though one of his swings might get 2,000 power minus, he'll go right back up to 9,000 power for the other 2 swings. Now, if you've been a part of the channel, you know I love Zoro Sanji, and I actually have 2 lists for Zoro Sanji that I'm going to show you guys. The first one that I have, this is the top 4 list that excelled in the recent Treasure Cup that happened the previous weekend, right? The first weekend of OP13 being legal, this person got top 4. And I know Vampire Gaming put out a video doing an interview with that guy in a deck discussion of this deck list. So I will link that down in the comments as well. Love Vampire. Great content creator. You should follow him. And so that can give you a little bit of help. But looking at this list right here, right? Zoro and Sanji, a 4-life green-blue Straw Hat Crew slash strike 5,000 power leader. Got a ton ×1 effect when attacking once per turn. If you return one of your characters with a cost of 2 or more to the owner's hand, specifically being your character, you can't do your opponent's character. That would make this deck broken. You can set up to one of your 7,000 power or less characters as active, making this a very aggressive style deck. You have so many really good targets that are 7,000 power and less, right? Zoro, one of the best cards in green for OP13, being able, because you're a Straw Hat Crew leader, to restand Dawn to utilize for your leader effect. And at the end of turn, he restands himself as active, so forcing your opponent to either have a resting effect or a removal effect of some sort to be able to get rid of this guy. He can't just battle. You've got Arlong, right? Even though the counts of Arlong have dipped down a little bit now that we're not running a East Blue specific version, a slash type character that forces your opponent's rested leader to not attack until their next turn. This is a really good card in the Zoro matchup, right? Pretty much just like wins it at that point if you see multiple of these. Still tricky though, don't get me wrong. But also really good in something like Ace. If they don't really have a board at all on the field, you can go ahead, be super aggressive in your swings, and you're not going to expect any attacks on the clapback in the next turn. Cavendish is probably the most important 4-cost 6,000 power slash type character within this deck, right? With that, when attacking, you draw 2, trash 1. If you can get this to stick for multiple turns, oh my god, you're just winning the game. There's so much value in this card. There's so much card draw potential. It is just so good that your opponent has to respond to. Some of the other 6,000 power characters that you've got in there, you've got Kawamatsu, right? A slash type 2K, 6,000 power, and Trafalgar Law. You can choose to either play this or the new OP13 6-drop Trafalgar Law, but this card excels so much in being able to play out your draw support, right? Shambling back a character into your hand to play another character of a cost of 3 or less on the field. Some of your most important characters cost 3 or less, starting off with Perona. This is the whole draw engine, basically, of the deck, trying to find slash attribute characters. If my math was correct, there's only 12 targets that are not applicable to grab off of Perona, right? Being able to find your 2Ks in Hachan and Kawamatsu. Oh, also Dracul Mihawk as well, which is so good for playing Zoro, Arlong, or Cavendish, by the way. It helps you find Vivi, which is a huge part of your draw engine, right? Because our leader is multicolored and we can balance the 5 in hand every time you play this down, it is going to be a raw draw 2, right? It could be a draw 2 just from playing it down onto the field. It could be that you cheated it out with Trafalgar Law. And Trafalgar Law also playing Tashigi if we need some protection for our green characters like Arlong, 5-cost Law, 6-cost Luffy, which we'll get to 6-cost Luffy here in a second. My favorite card within this deck, and one of the reasons why I really wanted to show off this top 4 list, is Vanderdecken. I love Vanderdecken. It is so funny to KO literally anything you want. And because we play 11 different Fishman kind of cards, which by the way, actually, it's not 11, it's actually 17 different Fishman cards. Oh wait, no, it's 14 Fishman cards. I should just look at Eggman's site, because Eggman's site and Deck Builder is very, very good for telling you these things. You don't have to do the math in your head. Vanderdecken allows you, if you trash either Hachan, Arlong, Kawamatsu, Hody Jones, you can KO any rested character on the field. No matter the cost, no matter the power, they just gotta be rested. And guess what? With your leader effect, you could just pick up Vivi to draw more cards next turn. You could just pick up Vanderdecken to be able to KO another character next turn. Or you could pick up something like Dracula Mihawk to be able to get another 2K back in your hand. It is, oh my god, I love Vanderdecken. I will use it anytime I can. But the 6-cost Luffy, I think, is a really neat card within this deck list, right? With that on play, because your leader is multicolored, you can stand up for Dawn as active. And even though you can't play a character card with a base cost of 5 or more during the turn, being something like Trafalgar Law, it allows you to potentially play something like Roronoa Zoro, right? A 4-cost on the field that will restand 2 more Dawn. And now you've got 2 Dawn left to be able to utilize with your leader effect, right? If earlier in a different turn, you played something like Vivi, you played something like Mihawk. And by the way, if this guy sticks on the field, he's going to hit double attack, especially as a 7,000 power base character. You now have a situation to where, oh wait, if I don't attach any Dawn to Luffy and make him an 8,000 power character, I can actually swing with him twice with my leader effect. 2 different swings of double attack. Broken. I've also got a Kylakai's version of the list. Another great content creator if you want to go check him out. Good friend of mine. He's playing a more Supernova centralized version instead of the Fishman package, right? A different way that you can build this. Utilizing 2-drop Kid and Killer, right? Kid and Killer looking for a Supernova type card sadly doesn't find Cavendish like it does in the green decks, but you can find Zoro. You can find a 2K in Scratchman Apu. You can find 5-cost Trafalgar Law, right? If you remember, Green Yellow Law really loved the comboing. And also you can find your secret rare Luffy. And by the way, after you play down the Kid Killer, it's perfect to be able to utilize with your Dawn ×1 leader effect, because Kid Killer costs 2, and now you can restand a character swing again. One of the cards I also like in this list is Yamato, right? Especially because you're a 4-life leader. It's more often than not on something like a 5 Dawn turn that you are going to be at 3 or less life. And especially if you are on a 5 Dawn turn, you go ahead, play this character down, draw 2 cards, but then give a rested Dawn to your leader to potentially utilize leader effect. It's such a really good combination to be able on that on play to help get your leader effect off more consistently, in my opinion. Kailakai was also running Uta. Uta, I think, is really cool as well, right? Similar to the 4-drop Zoro, it restands Dawn cards and you can play a cost of 5 or more during the turn, allowing you to play another one of your 4-drops like Cavendish. You can even play this Zoro down to restand even more Dawn. But one of the things that I find most interesting is if your opponent decides to KO this Uta has an on KO effect of being able to play a cost 5 or less from your hand as rested, which could be a Zoro, which could be a Cavendish, which could be a Trafalgar Law to immediately shambles, which could be a Yamato to be able to draw cards. This Uta, I think, is really, really cheeky, and I really enjoy this card in the deck and something I really want to try, even though it's a special and not searchable off of something like Perona or Kid and Killer. He's also got Sugar in the deck. I like Sugar, right? I've played Sugar in stuff like my Rosinante deck, even though you don't get that opponent's turn once per turn off because you're not a Don Quixote Rosinante type leader. Just being able with that on play of resting a 4-cost or less, which could be a Marco, which could be a Warcury, which could be a Koshiro, plenty of different good 4-cost blockers within this format. You can just pick it right back up and then threaten to play it again next turn. You've got a really good matchup into Emu with this deck, but you struggle a little bit with Ace, and I think Zoro is a little bit more of a skill check kind of deck. But either one of these versions, very fun in my opinion. Now, Uta is a deck that I always have sleeved up, and especially with the different film cards that we've already talked about in this video, with the Zoro, right, film typing, the Sanji film typing, the 10-drop Shanks film typing. You have so many, the Uta, right? The Uta that we just talked about. You have so many new cards to be able to play with within this deck, including the film 6-cost Trafalgar Law, which once again, a film card. To just have so much consistency within this deck and a very, very threatening aura. Uta, if you do not know, Dawn ×1 when attacking once per turn. You reveal the top card of your deck and add a film type card to your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. Especially because, as you see on Eggman's lovely site, every single card in this specific deck list is film. You will never whiff on your leader effect. Your leader effect is literally a draw 1 card, which, if you do not know, is very impactful for a lot of decks. There's some things in this deck that I'm playing around with and I don't know if it's correct, right? Especially because you have a lot of non-counter in this deck. 23 targets of non-counter, which is something I'm definitely considering. Right, Beppo, a nice card at the end of turn. You can set either this character or one of your Dawn cards as active, a 7,000 power character, and especially because you're not playing any counter events in this deck, it doesn't make sense to be able to restand one of your Dawn cards at the end of turn as active. So might as well just go ahead and put Beppo up, a 7,000 power character that you have to remove by an effect on the field. You can't battle this character because, well, he's active. I'm also trying out Nico Robin in my list. Now, it's just a one of, I know, it's not a very popular tech card that a lot of people are doing, but with that on play of being able to nullify an 8-cost or less can actually be so good, right? Being able to make sure a blocker cannot be rested, can make sure that a threatening character that could attack, well, now it can't attack at all. It's something to try out. The Uta working out so well alongside Rornor's Zoro, right? Not only can you cheat it out, but either of these characters gets a Dawn as active alongside this. Sanji can also do it with the on plays to be able on curve to get your leader effect off much more often, right? One of the things that I think this deck struggled with prior to OP13 is playing on curve, right? On a 4 Dawn turn, it was probably a great idea to play Brook down, to be able to cheat out like Nami, to be able to cheat out potentially Katakuri, but you wouldn't have any Dawn to attach to your leader. Now, especially within that mid game, you could restand a couple Dawn on curve. Think about this way. If you go on 3, right, and maybe you play this Nami on curve, sure, you don't get your leader effect off or you don't get the when attacking off, but then later on 5, you can go ahead, play Sanji down on the field, restand 2 Dawn. That's perfect to be able to use this Nami's when attacking effect, right, and search, while also attaching 1 Dawn to your leader and using leader effect for another draw 1, right? This Sanji effectively is a restand 2 Dawn and draw 2, almost. At least a draw 1, right? If maybe you're on the even curve, you play the Zoro on curve, obviously you don't have a Nami on field, but you've got this Zoro on curve to be able to utilize Uta's effect, right? That just provides so much value, and with something like Trafalgar Law, right? Maybe after swinging with a 4-drop Zoro, you can go ahead, pick him back up with Trafalgar Law, play him back down on the field and restand 2 Dawn again. Or maybe if you put this Katakuri on field and maybe you don't want it anymore on the field, you just go ahead, pick it right back up and then play a 5-cost or less, which is a majority of your deck. 10-drop Shanks obviously works very, very well within this deck, right? Being able to search more off Nami, be able to swing big with leader and character, characters to get your leader effect off. KO Shank's also very, very good to be able to get rid of any rested character on the field. And then your restand event, I'm invincible. Now, the next deck I have is from Krolzor. I think he played this in one of the Chinos Cups and actually did very, very well. I've got a video that he had explaining this video and kind of showcasing this deck linked as well below if you want to check it out. Very informative. But Blue Purple Luffy, a deck that has kind of really fallen out of any sort of potential, it feels like, in this format, is one that I know a lot of people love, right? Gear 5, one of the more exciting moments in the One Piece series, and honestly just a very fun leader effect in general. Not only can you give all your characters +1 cost with that Dawn ×1 that is ongoing both on your turn and your opponent's turn, but on top of that, your turn once per turn, when you put 2 or more Dawn cards back into your deck, you can re-ramp them, adding 1 as active and 1 as rested, especially with different stuff like Zoro, right? Being able to return 2, ramp 1 back up. Robin, right? Being able to return 2, get 1 back up, and then your leader effect off, which is effectively ramping. And even something like Black Maria, right? Black Maria with that end of turn still works alongside your leader effect because it is still your turn. So after you go ahead, put away Black Maria and get to that same number as your opponent, you're going to be able to re-ramp 2 of those Dawn. Very good, especially if you're facing against a other purple deck of some sort. Maybe like Pluffy, which we'll talk about a Pluffy list later in this video. Man, this video's, it's going to be so long. I've already been recording for like an hour. Oh my gosh. We're like not even halfway done with these lists. Especially in PRBO2, getting the 2-drop Nami Searcher, it adds another element of search within your deck that you can utilize so you don't just have Trafalgar Law to be able to find your Straw Hat Crew kind of cards. I'll talk about some of the tech cards within this list. The first one you may have saw and been like, what the heck? It's Morgan's. Morgan's just a nice 3-drop blocker with an on-play of draw 2, trash 2 from your hand. Especially in the early game, if you end up missing something like Robin or Zoro, you can at least filter through your hand to get away from a crap hand, be able to set up a little bit and play out the next couple turns. Magellan, you may have seen me talk about on this channel how cool Magellan can be against some decks of knocking them off of curve. A super sticky body that I think your opponent is really going to have to work around, especially as a 6,000 power character most often than not is going to be swinging for the fences without any Dawn attached. We talked about in Red Black Sabo how good Stussy is, and Stussy could be very good within this deck as well, right? Not only getting rid of your little 1-drop or maybe 2-drop Nami, but also potentially something like Black Maria, right? There's a certain point in the game where you don't actually really need Black Maria on the field, and so Stussy is a great target for any of those 3 cards to be able to remove a 10-drop Edward Newgate, to be able to remove a 9-drop Zoro off the field. And similar to Red Black Sabo, if you just get 1 or 2 Stussies off, you pretty much just win the game a lot of times. Don't forget as well that the Rush Luffy from EBO2 also works alongside your leader effect, right? Because you have to return 2 Dawn into your deck, your leader effect goes off and you're able to just bring back 1 Dawn as active and 1 as rested. I always love seeing a purple black Luffy list. Now we've got this red green Luffy list from Rick Master Flash, if you know who that is. Another great content creator. Again, I'll link him in the pinned comment. Red Green Luffy is this very interesting deck that somehow balances between aggression and defense, right? A brand new OP13 leader, 4 life red green, Dawn ×1 on your opponent's attack. If you have 5 or less active Dawn cards on your field, you can rest any number of your active Dawn cards. And if you do, up to one of your leaders or Straw Hat Crew type characters gain 2,000 power for each Dawn that was rested by this effect. So essentially, if you have 5 Dawn active on your opponent's attack, you have as much as 10,000 power character for all your Straw Hat Crew kind of cards, which is almost everything in this deck. The only things that are not Straw Hat Crew base are the Garp, which is an incredible searcher in this deck because, well, your leader is Luffy. Tashigi, which is generically good protection green. We've already seen it in some lists. And Trafalgar Law, right? Being able to cheat out any of these characters on the field. especially because you play 11 different one-drop searchers. Trafalgar Law synergizes so well with this deck to be able to play a Sanji, to be able to play a Sanji, or a Zoro onto the field. Especially because you have a card like Charleston, right from OP13, you're actually able on the counter phase to go ahead, use Charleston, gain plus 4,000 power, trash one card from hand, and restand 3 Dawn, which, especially if you started out on 3 Dawn on your opponent's turn as active, it's almost like pseudo restand ramping to where now if you started out with 3 Dawn, you can go to 4 Dawn because Charleston restands more Dawn than what it costs. And then you can use your Dawn ×1 ability to get more counter if you needed it. This deck, especially in the endgame, really loves utilizing something like Zoro or the secret rare Luffy to be able to go in with an unblockable swing, right? I think in the Japan Championships very early in the OP13 format, we saw a red-green Luffy do exactly that in the 3v3 tournament. Since this Sanji gives the unblockable to a 6,000 power or more character, that's literally this Sanji right here because it becomes a 6,000 power on your turn. This Sanji, this double attack Luffy, and this Zoro, especially when you've got Gum Gum Giant Pistol as well, which I love this card. This is so good in an end game, right? On a 10 Dawn turn going for game, when you have this Zoro, you can go ahead, pay 3 for Gum Gum Giant Pistol to make Zoro a 15,000 power character, pay 2 more for Sanji to make Zoro unblockable for a total of 5 Dawn, and then you need 3 more additional Dawn out of your 5 left to be able to utilize these effects on the Zoro, so you can leave the 2 other Dawn that are active to attach to make him 3 different 17,000 power swings. I think I did the math right. This deck is so cool in my opinion, especially if you have the different secret rares of the Luffy and Zoro from the last couple sets, right? Zoro got reprinted in PRBO2, so it's a relatively decently priced secret rare. And especially this Luffy, like this Luffy, I think on market price is only like 10 bucks right now, which there are multiple decks that we've showcased where you can play this card. So I think 10 bucks is a fine value. Oh, okay. I know I screwed up. I know this video is every deck not named Zoro, and I know this guy is named Zoro, but he's a different Zoro. He's not a green Zoro. He's a red Zoro. Stop typing in the comments. All the way back from OP01, right? This Zoro, a simple Dawn ×1 ability, your turn, all of your characters gain 1,000 power. Made it for a long time one of the best and most aggressive decks in the format. And especially when OP08 came out and this 3-drop chopper came into the format, it brought about this new wave of animal type version of this deck. And so if you haven't really bought cards from the last couple sets, no need to upgrade. Just go ahead and play your old faithful. I think the newest card is the EB02 chopper, right? Your goal here is to be extremely aggressive. Swarm out the different characters on field because of this Tony chopper, because of shut up and come with us, right? Playing out a character. Even something like the Alabasta OP04 Tony chopper cheating out a character, which could be this little guy, which could be this little guy, and swing for the fences, especially with a couple different 1-drop cards in here like Dr. Crueja, like Nami, like Buggy. You've got a handful of different ways to be able to power up those 1-cost characters to be able to swing alongside your leader effect of an extra 1,000 in Makino, right? The most common, I feel like, and most popular of these plus 3,000 power to a 1-drop kind of characters because it's a 2K that you can have. Magura, also another option, maybe if you don't have Makino. Being able on that on play to give plus 3,000 power makes it so this deck swings hard, right? teching in one of the options of a Luffy, a searchable card off of the 1-drop Nami, right, as its Straw Hat Crew, makes it so on curve on 5 you can utilize your leader effect, and now he becomes a 7,000 power swing without any Dawn attached. Your Kid Killer, right, if you get a Dawn on your leader, now swings 8,000 power if you fit that 2 or less life condition. Zoro, a 3-cost 6,000 power rush swing. And similar to the last list that we showed you in Red Green Luffy, you've got some unblockable Sanjis in this list to be able to go aggressively for game, and you also have Diable Jambe, an even cheaper version to be able to do that. Especially, like I mentioned, if you don't have any of the new recent cards in sets, but you want to be able to still play the game, Zoro, I think, is one of the better options out there in terms of a budget, because how many opponents can really deal with aggro consistently? Now, especially for all my Rosinante fans, this is a list I'm kind of thinking about in this format for OP13. Rosinante, if you do not know, is the only leader in the game that has blocker, right? You're able to potentially save one of your characters and redirect an attack into it. And at the end of turn, if you have 6 or less cards in hand, you set the leader as active, allowing you to swing with leader to then become a blocker once again. Some of the new cards that we've gotten in the last couple sets that I want to try out first is Otama. Because we don't necessarily have searching anymore, we just kind of have raw draw cards. I want to try out the idea of Otama to be able to get that big draw, right? Draw 2, trash 1, especially for a 4-life leader, can be really, really effective. Mr. 3. Galandino, another good card that we got in PRBO2, is something that you can play off of Eustace Captain Kidd, which could be very nice, right? Hitting that activate main effect. But if you're facing something like a green deck like Dead Man's Game or anything of the sort, you could just trash the character and draw 2 cards instead, which could be 2 cards that you love to see in this game. I've also wanted to put Yamato in here. Just like Otama has that 3 life condition to where you just raw draw 2 cards and you can attach a Dawn on your leader. This card could be nice in the deck, especially because with 6,000 power leaders like Ace running around in the format, I might not have many opportunities in the early game to be able to swing at Ace. So, especially with Yamato, I now have a way to do that, right? Playing on a 5 Dawn turn. And again, draw 2 cards, pretty good. The card that I'm most excited about trying in this is the new Trafalgar Law. Right, we are a big defensive deck. We have a couple blockers of Rosinante. We've got a couple blockers of Duval. We've got a couple blockers of Koshiro, a couple blockers of Mr. 3. We even have Eustace Captain Kidd, for crying out loud, which is basically a blocker. Adding some more blockers in Trafalgar Law, especially with the later stages of the game, right at 1 or less life being a blocker, also allows me potentially to grab something off the field like Otama, right? Potentially grab something like Dracula Mihawk if I played it earlier in the turn, to be able to play out some important 5-cost or less bodies, right? Sabo, a good card, right? Whether he's active or rested, he can protect something on the field. Cavendish, a great body. Like I said earlier in the Zoro Sanji list, you get this guy to stick, especially in a defensive deck like this. It is so hard to lose. You have so much card draw. Carrot, one of the important cards that I actually loved in Rosinante, and I'm so glad I put it in my list for the LCQ at Bandai Card Fest. A great way to be able to cheat out that body, and even something like Yamato, to where on 6, I can play down Trafalgar Law, cheat out this Yamato, and then draw some cards and swing with lead. I don't really have any testing with this list. I've been a little bit too focused on Sabo as of late, but especially when I need a break from Sabo and I want to try out more things in this format, this is going to be the first deck that I try out, especially with some of the new cards that we've gotten, like this Yamato, like this Trafalgar Law, like Otama. I have a hard time believing that this deck is maybe in a worse position than where it was before. Especially, man, we just have so much raw draw in this deck. Let me know your thoughts down below with the Rosinante list. Now, I know some of you may moan and groan with Blue Purple Luffy because you're like, oh my god, we just got rid of this guy. But he's a pretty good deck within this format, even without the Roger promo. Because because that's a little bit delayed. I definitely think he's in a worse position without the Roger promo, but he's still a decent deck to play within this format, right? Especially if you invested so much in OP12 and OP11 in this deck. You don't have to sell your cards. You can keep your cards. Continue playing them, right? Some of the new stuff that we got in OP13 that can work out with this deck, Otama is the most obvious of them all, right? Especially because you are a 3-life leader. Otama is right away a very easy draw to trash 1, right? Can really help set up your hand to be able to find the different ramping effects like Gear 2, It's to Die For, Bond Clay, Zoro, Juro. Just makes it an excellent target. Now, because we don't have the Roger promo, there are some other things that are in this deck that we didn't see often too many times. Douglas Bullet, I think, is one of the more popular new options, right? Several people playing this. This film type Pirates Fest from Starter Deck 5, right? The Shanks Purple Shanks Starter Deck, BDIF, is an 8-cost 10,000 power character that, honestly, Dawn times 4, rest 2 characters with a cost of 6 or less on the activate main, and then you gain double attack is so good within the Emu matchup. You rest the Marcus Mars, you rest the War Curie, and by the way, this one swing that is at least 10,000 power will hit double attack. And by the way, you can cheat it out with Sanji. Now, you do a little bit sacrifice your leader effect to be able to play this card, but this feels very much like an Ender, I'm going for game kind of thing. Because the Roger promo is gone, I've actually slid in a couple copies of this Kozuki Odin. Now, I don't know necessarily if this Odin is good, but trying to look for other big body characters that I can cheat out with Sanji, Kozuki Odin was one of the first that came into mind. One, it's got that double attack, right? Very similar to Douglas Bullet. But on top of that as well, if your opponent tries to KO it for whatever reason, you do get that draw 2 trash 1 from your hand, which could actually benefit you in more ways than one. I've still got the Rosinante engine within this deck, right? Especially with that end of turn being able to set 2 up as active for all of these events, especially Thunder Bagua. It's a really cool idea to maybe test out within this format. I don't know. Again, I think Blue Purple Luffy not as good as what it is with the Roger promo, and I think a lot of Blue Purple Luffy leaders and players are in the Roger promo waiting room in January. But until then, maybe try this out. Goldie Roger in OP13 is also one of the leaders that got stumped with the delay of the 8-cost promo Roger, but I've actually got 2 different deck lists here for you that if you want to try this guy out, I highly encourage that you try one of these 2 different ways. Goldie Roger, if you do not know, because he is a new leader, red purple 7,000 power base Pirate King Roger Pirates type, the only 7,000 power leader in the game. And by the way, he's at 5 life. But if you have 9 or less Dawn cards on your field, he actually goes down to a 5,000 power leader. So that's kind of the trade back for being at 5 life. And this is a little confusing for people who have never played the deck before. If you have Dawn cards on your field, when you add Dawn from your Dawn phase, you have to attach one of those Dawn that you add to your leader. So here's an example. You're starting out in the game, you have 0 Dawn, you go into your first turn. Just go ahead and put 2 out because you did not have Dawn on your field during your Dawn phase as you started adding Dawn. You don't need to attach one to leader. But then going into your 4 Dawn turn, before you add Dawn from your Dawn deck onto the field, you see, oh, I have 2 Dawn on the field. So now when you add those 2 Dawn to go to 4, you have to attach one to leader. So you only have 3 active Dawn and 1 attached Dawn on your 4 Dawn turn. This is a deck very similar to Blue Purple Luffy where you're just trying to ramp every turn at the beginning of the game, right? You've got cards like Douglas Bullet in here that ramps a Dawn, Bond Clay ramping a Dawn, Scopper Gaban or Scooper McGabbin, my favorite Roger Pirate, who also ramps a Dawn, but on top of that, draws 2, trashes 1, and even Silver's Rayleigh. By the way, you've got this event, which only costs 2 to be able to ramp. Well, I guess it technically costs 3 because you have to pay 1, you have to rest an additional Dawn, and you have to have a Dawn attached to your leader. So it's technically a gear 2. basically. But on top of that, even your 2Ks like Buggy, Ramp 1 Dawn. You're basically trying to get to 7,000 power as fast as possible to be able to overwhelm your opponent with these big bodies that you're cheating out so early. 4 copies of 10 drop rush Shanks, right? This is a very, very popular card that I see in almost every single Roger deck list. Not only are you able to get that 12,000 power rush, but be able to minus 1,000 power everywhere on the field on your opponent's side for their characters is so good for board control, is so good for blocking, right? Especially in the ace matchup, if you've got the Shanks in front of a 10 drop Edward Newgate blocker, they actually have to pitch at least a 2K if they block this 12,000 power swing, because Edward Newgate goes down to an 11,000 power character. You also utilize this 9 drop Edward Newgate, which has definitely seen a rise, so you should have picked up the cards when I was telling you guys to a couple months ago. Edward Newgate with that on play is plus 2,000 power, right? You see it in ace as a way to be an 8 to 10,000 power character on your opponent's turn. Roger works in that same essence, right? As a 7,000 power character when you have 10 Dawn on your field, Newgate is a way when you're going into your 10 Dawn turn and you have to attach 1 to your leader, so you only have 9 active Dawn. You can play this guy out and be a 9,000 power leader. It is so hard to battle against Roger when he's sitting at 9,000 power, right? It doesn't really matter what deck you are, because it's so much easier for him to counter out with something like Divine Departure, Let's Have Another Scrap, Radical Beam, and it really kind of forces you to spend a turn going at board instead. Roger's another cool one that has been introduced in the OP13 format, and if you want to try him out, I recommend either doing this version or this film version. I saw this film version from Copium made on Twitter, claiming that he's top 100 on ranked sim with this film version, and so I thought it was a really, really interesting concept, right? Although your film targets are not many with Buena Festa, you are still able to grab important 2Ks like Uta, which in the previous GARP list is not searchable. You can find Douglas Bullet, right? A vanilla 2K, but still a pretty decent card, especially as its former Roger Pirates as well. Meteor Strike of Love, which is a tech card that some people have been talking about online, which I think is really interesting, right? A searchable event card that gives extra power either on the main phase for the aggressive side going for game or on the counter phase, and can also, by the way, activate Goldie Roger if you put yourself down to 0, and also Douglas Bullet, right? Douglas Bullet is a film card and former Roger Pirates. So although you really only probably thought about him as a option for Shanks, you could actually find him in 2 different searches. And by the way, Douglas Bullet, being former Roger Pirates as well on that 2K, is another searchable card off of Shanks. The synergy is really, really cool with the film stuff in this deck, right? And could be a way for Purple Film to finally get some limelight in this game. If you've been wanting to play Roger but are really frustrated about the 8-drop promo being delayed, I highly recommend trying this list out. This version is really, really cool. Now we've got Green Bonnie as well. This is a tried and true version of the deck. You may not be ultimately surprised. This is the version that I believe was the one that won the Japan Championship that we covered on this channel, and I wanted to showcase this one for a couple different reasons. One, he ended up playing 5-cost Stun Bonnie from OP07, and I thought that was a really interesting choice, right? Especially with that on play. If you remember me talking about my green, yellow law regional topping breakdown with my friend Richie back in like the OP11 format, we talked about how Jewelry Bonnie could actually be really, really good for knocking your opponent off curve, but also just nullifying a rested character, right? There's not a condition of cost, power, color. It just has to be either a rested Dawn or character, which really can buy you a lot of time within this game for a slow deck like Bonnie. A couple cards of Law and Beppo really like this card in the Bonnie list, right? Being able to put you to a 7,000 power leader on your opponent's turn can be so nice, right? For a lot of different reasons, but on top of that, proactively rest and freeze a character. That could be a blocker, that could be a very aggressive threat on your opponent's side of the board, and especially with stuff like Kid Killer, searching for supernovas, and Bonnie on top of that, This is searchable in your deck. It is a searchable boss monster, and by the way, it's the only searchable boss monster that you have, which provides some consistency within the late game of being able to play out these big giant Bonnies. I also like the idea of Trafalgar Law in this list, right? Very similar to what I was talking about in Rosinante, where you just play a lot of your really good 5 costs, right? You can play this Stun Bonnie for free. You can play Jewelry Bonnie. You can play Cavendish, and on top of that, Carrot, which are all very important cards within this deck. I think Bonnie really needs to have a good mid game to be able to really excel in the late game and apply a lot of pressure to be a successful deck. Although Bonnie might not be the most exciting deck to a lot of people, if you're looking for a refresh or honestly one of the more viable off-meta picks within this format, I think Bonnie's a really good one, especially with the Roger promo gone. You now, in theory, have a better matchup into Blue, Purple Luffy and Roger. It wouldn't surprise me if at these treasure cups, especially at these local store regional kind of things, or store treasure cups, I think they're called, you see a fair amount of players playing Bonnie. Now let's talk about Ploofy. This is an exact 50 of one of my friends, Denim TCG. Again, I'll link him as well in the pinned comment. Made a funny video, good intro, of Ploofy. I know he's been very passionate about it. If you do not know, Ploofy from OP13, the activate main once per turn, you add a card from the top of your life to your hand, and if you have 0 or 3 or more Dawn cards on your field, you can ramp a Dawn as active, self-inflicting life to be able to ramp. Allows you a very consistent way to get that ramp off, and you have other options in Bond Clay, right? Being able to ramp. Potentially Inuarashi ramping. Silver's Rayleigh, right? A card that we talked about, just so good, being able to rest and ramp an active Dawn with 9,000 power rush. Can set you up for a lot of good plays, especially when you have the card named Magellan. Now, we've talked about Magellan a little bit on this channel already, but such a good card in stuff like the Emu matchup, being able to knock any of your opponents off curve. And like I said earlier, right, is a sticky body on the field because your opponent doesn't want to KO it and -2 Dawn. Especially when you talk about the early to mid game where they're trying to get to 10 for their end Dawn plays. Because the Paraband didn't affect you, Charlotte Katakuri is a great card to add in the deck as well, right? Even though you don't have a ton of Big Mom Pirates targets, being able to restand himself as an 8,000 power character to then be a blocker on your opponent's turn and then also ramp a Dawn as rested can be so nice if you plan on doing certain things within this deck like Gum Gum Giant to go back and Dawn minus. It's a great way to be able to recur Dawn. I like the 2 cheap copies of Trafalgar Law right from starter deck 10, especially because there are a lot of decks right now that'll just build up cards in hand, maybe take a little bit in the early game or just have raw draw like Ace, right? Taking a card off leader effect on a KO, maybe have a Marco block and take more cards. You can really punish your opponent with this 4-drop Law to be able to trash 2 random cards from their hand, which could be very impactful cards. I also like the Divine Departure in here, similar to what I was talking about earlier in the Limb deck, I believe it was, being able not only to be a 0-3,000 power counter event, but being able to -8,000 power on one of your opponent's characters to then go in and swing out with some of these characters like Bond Clay, where I might be able to copy another character on field. Sanji being able to aggressively swing at something. Katakuri, because he'll restand at the end of turn. Silver's Rayleigh, Rush, Luffy. The list goes on and on. This is a very cool deck. I'm really excited to maybe see some people pick up on this and play it a little bit more in this format. And again, shout out to Denim, which by the way, Denim, hurry up and release another YouTube video. Now, in the France Treasure Cup, there was a player that made top 16 with Charlotte Pudding. I know there was a little bit of noise about, you know, the specific rulings and stuff like that that happened in that tournament. I'm not going to think about that. I am just strictly thinking about the deck and how it was awesome that it made top 16 in the Treasure Cup in France. This was piloted by Quentin Ramis, and I'm going to try to look for like a Twitter or a video or something like that, but I'll at least leave his name in the comment pinned below of all the credits of some of these deck lists if I can't find anything on him. And if you do find his like Twitter or Instagram or something of the sort, if he has a YouTube channel, please link it to me in the comments as well, because I want to make sure I get this credit out. Charlotte Pudding hasn't had a lot of limelight since its release in OP08. A 4-life purple-yellow Big Mom Pirates leader. When attacking, you may turn 2 cards from the top of your life face up. And if you do, add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck and rest it, being able on that attack to just go ahead and ramp Dawn. Especially when you play cards like Charlotte Katakuri that turn life back face down to be able to ramp. You have a couple opportunities within this deck to be able to ramp multiple times in a single turn, right? You're playing a lot of good Big Mom Pirates kind of cards. Zeus, an excellent card that usually we see as a non-searchable card in decks, actually searchable, right? Which is very scary, I think. Charlotte Pudding, right? For minusing 2 Dawn, you're able to not only draw cards, but play a 6,000 to 8,000 power character on the field with the Big Mom Pirates type. And not only do you have this Charlotte Katakuri that we talked about earlier, couldn't be very, very good, but you've also got the yellow Secret Rare Katakuri from OP13, right? To be able to have some removal potential, get something off your opponent's side of the field and into their life, or maybe even in your life. Or the blocker Katakuri, which, by the way, his end of turn is so good now in comparison to the Ploofy deck because you can restand all these Big Mom Pirate cards, forcing your opponent to go at face, being able to swing in at life, or if you got a couple of these guys on field, be able to reutilize blockers. Obviously using 10-drop Charlotte Linlin because this is, I mean, if you're playing a Big Mom Pirate deck and it's partially yellow, you have to play this card. Like this card, if you see it in like back-to-back turns, literally just like wins games. But one of the cards that I thought was very interesting within this deck is Slow Beam, right? We talked about Slow Beam a little bit earlier, so I won't spend too much time on it. But this Foxy Pirates 2-cost event is such a good one, right? For the reasons that I mentioned earlier, proactively resting different characters. But I really like the single copy tech card of Blast Breath, right? Especially in the late stages of the game where maybe minusing 1 Dawn really doesn't matter on the counter phase because you're going to go back up to 10 anyways in the next turn. Blast Breath is a really, really cool card because it's a 1 Dawn 4,000 power counter event, which is honestly so valuable. Katakuri, I think, is a really good card. I mean, this is the Katakuri deck, honestly. Being able in the late stages of the game to only pay 2 Dawn to get something like this Katakuri out onto the field, or this Katakuri out onto the field, or maybe this Katakuri out onto the field is a great way to cheat out these big threatening bodies that your opponent has to respond and deal with. I think Charlotte Pudding is a really cool pick for this format if you want to play around with something unique, and I highly encourage you to try it out, especially if you have, you know, these Big Mom Pirate packages. You've also, God, I hate this card so much. I hate this card so much. And the last deck I'll talk about in this video is Martial D. Teach. Now, this did really well on a store battle in Argentina, and I thought it was a really interesting move on Teach, as a lot of people have kind of come off it in this format, but I feel like he's kind of a sneaky pick a lot of times. So I'll leave a link to the One Piece top decks listing where I saw the list and it was inputted. Right, Martial D. Teach, if you do not know, is the floodgate of the format. You can't play on play effects, but if you trash a card from hand on your activate main, your opponent also can't play on play effects during their next turn. Think about how many great cards that we have in Ace. Think about how many great cards that we have in Emu. Think about how many great cards we even have in Zoro, where on play effects are so impactful. Martial D. Teach is a great way to control the field and force your opponent to really take an abstract game plan, right? You have your typical package in this deck: Stronger, Lafitte, Caribou.Q, Burgess, Kuzan, Van Augur, another Kuzan. You got your My Era Begins, Full Lead, but you've also got some other tech cards, right? Shiryu from PRBO2, one of the new unique cards, is a nice 4-drop blocker that allows you to be able to KO a base cost of 4 or less on your opponent's side after you go ahead and block with him. Can be a very, very nice card in my opinion, and also very searchable within this deck. You've got Vivi, right? We've thought about Vivi a little bit in the Emu decks, but it's also applicable in this deck because you're definitely going to get 10 or more cards in trash, so Vivi's going to be able to gain that blocker. Tempest Kick, a card that we've seen in the past in Blackbeard decks, just really good to be able to draw 1 card. And also potentially in the later stages of the game, -3 to be able to set up for different cards like Doc Q, right? And potentially even Black Hole, another tech card. Being able to nullify an opponent's effect and then KO a 4-cost or less doesn't deal with base 4-cost or less, is just a simple 4-cost or less. So your stuff like Van Augur, so your stuff like Tempest Kick to be able to minus your opponent's side of the field works out with Black Hole. Blackbeard, definitely a very difficult deck to play. It's not something that you can just pick up and excel with right away. You really need to understand your matchups to be able to play this deck. But as a lot of people have had in the past, if you learn those and you take the time to really excel with it, it can be so beneficial to you. And it's also one that I think a lot of people are not practicing against. So you can really surprise a lot of people and really put them on their feet of how they want to approach this matchup and how they go into that game plan when you match up within a tournament. But that's going to be it. Another video of like over an hour long, potentially, no, it's probably not an hour and a half. It's probably a little less than an hour and a half of yapping. I've been yapping on recording for about an hour and 45 minutes, but I hope you enjoyed this style of video. I also plan on in the future kind of taking some of these deck lists and going and trying to vlog at local events with these kind of more abstract decks that are not Ace, Emu, or Zoro. So let me know if you have any specific decks that you want me to try out and play, especially at these local tournaments, down in the comments below. Especially as I'm planning like for holiday travel, right? Going home, seeing my family, seeing my girlfriend's family. I'm going to be gone for like 2 weeks, but I still want to put out videos because, well, this is my full-time job, and if I don't put out videos, I don't get paid. So again, let me know what you want to see, and I hope to see you again in the future.